So we know that Iran, from the outcomes of the initial talks in Islamabad, and also potentially talks that even happened before the war, that Iran was willing to discuss at least a temporary pause in their enrichment program. Some reports are saying 5 years. And what's interesting is that it sounds, from reporting, it sounds like the United States actually offered a 20-year extension, or excuse me, pause in that enrichment as an alternative. And while they were certainly not coming together on that timeline, what it says is that there is potentially room for agreement there, depending on whether the sides are willing to come to some sort of compromise.
But didn't the president, forgive me, but didn't the president kind of throw some water on that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think caused a lot of confusion as to where the U.S. policy stands, because not only did he say that Iran would not be enriching uranium in perpetuity, but claimed that they had agreed to that. And so, the questions abound as to whether he was setting a new standard for negotiations, whether there was a perception that something had been agreed to in back-channel conversations that have been ongoing since the original Islamabad conversation or negotiations with Vice President Vance. We just don't know. And so that just adds further confusion to the situation we're in right now as to where either side lies. My gut would say that there really is space for agreement on that issue, and that the United States would show some flexibility, potentially, given the negotiating positions that the team has gone in with before. But right now, we don't know what's being put on the table.
Well, and then again, throw it again into the mix, what Israel wants from a deal in Iran, because I think it's safe to say that if they're not happy, this conflict continues, at least from their position.
I think it's really important to always keep Israel in mind as we're talking about the long-term stability of the Iran situation, right? I think more realistically, our assessment is that Israel likely could be kept from immediately escalating if the United States is able to come to some sort of agreement. But at the same time, in that medium and longer term, if Israel feels that Iran is developing new capabilities or pursuing technology that could threaten Israel, we've seen time and time again their willingness to take action against those threats with or without potentially U.S. approval. There's no doubt that Netanyahu is very sensitive to Trump's perception of him and support for Israel. So that does change the calculus. But over time, that risk will grow. And so, this is part of the reason that us here at Bloomberg Economics continue to assess that the most likely outcome in that near and medium term is some lower level of persistent conflict, whether that be directly between the United States and Iran, or Israel and Iran or other partners.
Right. And anything that puts the Strait of Hormuz at risk, right? That just keeps the energy, I don't want to say crisis, but certainly the strain on global energy supplies, keeping it going. And then you just potentially have the possibility of an impact on the global economy, right?
That's exactly right. And I think what we're talking about here is potentially a scenario where, yes, some shipping is moving through, but that insecurity and instability remains. And so you're looking at higher insurance costs, some shippers that are no longer willing to operate or push through, a changing calculus of energy producers in the Gulf as to how much they're willing to turn back on, given this question mark of how long the strait may be open. And all of that puts significant pressure on the global economy, particularly on inflation and potentially growth. Now, you said maybe not a crisis, but in parts of the world, we really are reaching crisis levels here in the next couple of weeks. And I really think we need to keep in mind that there are parts of Southeast Asia that are going to start running out of oil in the next several weeks, at least some certain types.